Hey, welcome back again to another episode of Politics for the Culture. I'm your host, Dwight Bullard. Again, want to remind folks, if you see the lapel pin, know that Wakanda's coming, right? Again, the blurred in me is excited to return back to Wakanda and the return of Black Panther 2. So excited. Again, if you do not know what a blurred is, it's a black nerd. It is me. I am him. That is what we do. Welcome back again to Politics for the Culture, where we look at politics for us, by us. We look at a gambit of different topics that have a political intersection. We bring guests on to have conversations that are important, maybe things you were thinking about, maybe things you weren't, but need to be thinking about. And so today's conversation, I think, is super timely, super important. Bringing on someone who I've known for quite some time. We actually went to middle school together, even though we didn't really meet each other until we were adults. But I call her a friend. She's a political consultant, co-founder of the K podcast, proud Dominican, none other than one Ms. Venusmia Fernandez. Welcome to Politics for the Culture, Venus. How are you doing?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Yes, indeed. So folks are wondering, yes, her name is Venusmia Fernandez. Yes, she is Hispanic. Why on Politics for the Culture? We talk about Black folks all the time. Why is she here? Because she is a proud Afro-Latina. We're going to talk about Blackness. We're going to talk about the spectrum of it. And so I wanted to bring on somebody who I know has really thrown down for the culture on multiple occasions. She has, been a part of arts, entertainment, politics for the culture, in the realest ways possible, to kind of talk about this notion of what it means to be Afro-Latina, what it means to be kind of a part of this spectrum of Blackness, and really, kind of delve into that topic a little bit. So Venus, I'm going to call her Venus for the show because we're friends, folks, but if you see in the streets, it's Venusmia. Don't get it twisted. But Venus, want to talk to you a little bit about this notion of Blackness, right? We're both from Miami, Florida, where we have clearly a lot of Latinx, Latino, Hispanic influence, Spanish language influence from, multiple facets of the population. But we also know that, many of these places were impacted by slavery, impacted by Black folks, impacted by Africanness and Blackness, including the Dominican Republic, where your folks are from. What and why do you find it important to embrace the Blackness of your culture?
Wow, that's a very good question. One, you know how people say that there's redheaded stepchildren in your family? Well, in my family, even though I don't have red hair, I would be the redheaded stepchild. My grandmother's a very dark skin. When she came to this country in 1946, all her paperwork says that she is a woman of color. It says colored on her paperwork. My grandfather is of Black descent from Savannah, Georgia. His last name is Scott. And his paperwork also said he's a colored man. So it's not necessarily, doing anything different. It was ingrained in me that my grandmother was a dark color, and especially living here in Miami. I didn't grow up understanding the Blackness per se. She just was darker than me. But, when you're in school and when people are asking you, are you sure that's your grandmother? Or they would say something in Spanish, and I'm just going to say it in English, you must have Black in you. You start questioning yourself and saying, well, I always found myself like honey, of the color of caramel. But you start saying to yourself, and as you get older, then you start, understanding your history, learning history. I mean, you mentioned earlier about slavery. I mean, Santo Domingo, which is a city in Dominican Republic, actually has historically it's the first place where slaves were exchanged back in the day. And that's historical fact that, that in DR, they talk about, and in many history books, they talk about. So it's not me recreating the wheel. It's just understanding the history and looking at my family and understanding that, yes. And if we want to talk about American history, I believe I don't quote me, but there's something that says if you got a little bit, you all of it. So, so it's just embracing who I am. It's really that's all.
All right, it's very that simple. She's referring to the one drop rule. That is right. She recognizes that American history says if you got one drop of black blood, you are black, and so she's definitely embraced it. But I think even more so than just kind of embracing it. Well, I want to stay on that topic a little bit. Why do you think it's important? Since we know the history of places like Oaxaca, Mexico. We know the places of, the black experience in Cuba, Colombia. Where there's literally an African presence in these spaces where you have this mixture of different cultures, oftentimes rooted in Africanness. I remember hearing Edward James Olmos speak and talking about how culturally he's made up of African blood and kind of embracing that. Why do you think more, folks who identify as Latinx, Latine, Latino, coming from these places that clearly have black influence, need to embrace, that Afro side of them being Afro Latino or Latina?
Well, I think it's just, if we really want to say that we're moving forward, personally, I can't speak for anyone else, but I can speak for myself. If we're really going to say that we're moving forward, it's to understand that is just part of who we are. I mean, that is, and if we really want to delve into even culture, yes, I'm a proud Dominican, but when you look at what we eat, what we do, it's rooted. It's rooted. It's not me inventing something. It's rooted from our traditional place, because I love plátano. That's my favorite thing. The traditional dish that we make in the morning called mango is actually from an African breakfast that is served almost identical, except for los tres golpes, which is, the cheese, the salami. So, we need to do it because it's just who we are. There's nothing wrong about it. And there's nothing degrading about it. If people don't want to embrace it, I think it's just they're being closed-minded of what we are. And the reality is the word Latino and Hispanic, that's a new word that didn't appear into the 1980 census. And it was just another way to categorize us, instead of just saying that we're people. I'm an American born here, but culturally I'm Dominican. But my family reflects the diaspora of many cultures. And I just think that we need to do it as in just moving forward. You can't use the word progressive. You say that I'm for people, and then you're just kind of taking parts of yourself out. Everything about you is what makes you, from the culture, from embracing everything, from the bad hair, as they say in Spanish, pelo malo, which is just, my mother always taught me that the only difference between my curls and my cousin's curls is my hair grows straight, then curls, hers come out curly. So natural hair is natural hair. Pelo malo, bueno, it's the same thing,
I hear that.
It's just part of who we are.
Undoubtedly. Embrace who you are, accept who you are, and keep moving forward. So, you have a unique kind of perspective because, you've really kind of leaned in, for those who don't know, we worked together. You were definitely a phenomenal chief of staff for the years I was an elected official. You worked with the Bullards in multiple facets. So you've been around Black culture and around Black people for an extensive part of your professional career. But, like some folks could have just easily said, all right, well, I've done that. I'm out. I'm good. Let me go back to, doing whatever else. But you've chosen to continue to navigate through these Black spaces with a level of intention, like a respect for the culture. So what kind of keeps you engaged or wanting to engage with Black people? And just so folks know, she serves as president of the Ron Brown Democratic Black Caucus here in the state of Florida, right? For those who don't know, Ron Brown was the first Black chair of the Democratic Party, and so the caucus reflects that. So yeah, could you tell us like why you think it's important to still continue to lean into these traditional Black spaces?
Well, one, it's going to come from my background and moving to Miami specifically. Growing up, and I'm going to say some things in Spanish and I'll translate. You'll hear the word, pero tú eres un poquito de morena, like you got Black in you and this and that. But it was always given in the negative intonation. But when I moved to Florida, I went to friends' houses, and then they're saying, "Oh, my mother made collard greens. They made sows. Oh, she's making grits." I'm like, "Oh, I love shrimp and grits." They're like, "Oh, you got a little Black in you." It was always on a positive note. It was never on a negative note. So I was like, "Oh, yes, I do." You know what I mean? Like, it was just the way it was brought. So it was actually the community that also just made me feel more welcome than my own Latino community, because it was always like a negative. If my cousin's hair was, what they consider natural, would be like, "Oh, she got hard hair, pero duro." And they're like, "Pero el tuyo es bueno, tú eres indio." That I have Indian in me. And I'm like, well, I don't know about Indian because my family's from another country and we're called Tainos there. But you know what I mean? But it was just the embracing of it, that it wasn't a bad thing to recognize it. It wasn't a bad thing to say anything. It is just who it is. And it was just more welcoming. So of course, then when you're in the community that welcomes you, then you see, things that you say to yourself, you know what? I know there's spaces that I can get into that obviously you're not getting into because they're just looking at you. They're just looking at your skin. So it's like, okay, well, if you can get in there, let me get in there first. Maybe I can unlock a door. Maybe I can hold the door open. Maybe I can go to the bathroom and open the window in the bathroom. You can slide in. You know what I mean? It's like we have to work together, because it's unfortunate that's the way it's working. But for me, is if I'm being welcome, then what can I do to make sure you're welcome as well? And that's where it really comes from. It wasn't. Yes, it's more now that I'm older. It's more an intentional thing in politics and community. But it really was started from that. Just saying it wasn't a bad thing. There's nothing bad about it. There was nothing negative about it. So it's like, yes, and then growing up, listening to music. I mean, my grandmother's one of her favorite two artists is James Brown and Johnny Ventura, which is called El Caballero, which is the gentleman. They're both dark-skinned men, Black men, that she would just be up and down. She would drag, as my mother would say, drag her to the Apollo Theater to see James Brown. And I would say something that my grandma said, but I don't want to get in trouble. But one time she said she even threw her panties on stage. And I was like, no, grandma, no. But she said it because she loved him. So, like,
I mean, the reality is those weren't the only panties on that stage. We know that the Godfather is so, got his fair share of bras and panties thrown at him, especially at the Apollo. So,
Yeah, so, you hear those stories and it's always a positive. And how my grandmother went, like I said, when she came to this country, she came from DR on a boat to Key West, from Key West to Savannah. The people that embraced her were Blacks, because she might have not spoken their language, but there was a kinship that they had. So, why can't I move it forward?
Hey, I love that. And kind of staying on those lines, right? Like we talk, we hear in this modern context this notion of allyship, right? And we live, as I mentioned at the beginning, we both live in Miami, and there's always, for some reason, been a real distinct tension between historical Black communities and historical Spanish-speaking communities. But, through your work, you're trying to build that bridge. If you could give advice to folks on kind of both sides of this, right? What would you say somebody who kind of lives in the middle is kind of maybe a good first step in building allyship, whether it's Black folks trying to reach out to Spanish speaking folks or vice versa, to build allyship and kind of move us forward?
The first thing I would always say is that it has to come from a place of respect and openness and grace, because everybody's experience is different. I mean, we can even take something as small as kids in the same house. They don't have the same experience. So it's okay for someone to say that that's not their experience with a different culture, a different race, anything like that. I mean, I myself, being of Dominican descent, factually surrounded by more African Americans or Blacks. But it's about grace, and it's about knowing that they know you're coming in with respect, and respecting when they say that they've had different experiences with that culture or that community. Because you know what? I know people, I've seen it myself, that my friends spoken to somebody Spanish and they'll say negative words towards them. And if they take it out on me, I get it. And I give them the space to let it out and just say, that was them. And I don't mean them as it, but that was that situation. And this is me. And let me tell you a little bit about myself and what we actually have in common, because I've experienced maybe not exactly what you went through, but something in that vein. I hope that, people understand that, because as a mother, I know that my children won't get stopped because they're Black, but my nephew will, my cousin will, my uncle has. I've been in a car with somebody else being stopped because they were Black. So just explain to them that small nuance that says, yes, I might not understand everything, but let me give you something that I went through that made me feel or have a little empathy and a little sympathy for what took place, because we all have it,
No doubt. I mean, thank you for that. And I'm hoping folks, really walk away from this conversation with a better level of understanding. Here on Politics for the Culture, we also like to be a little playful because we like to talk about the culture a little bit. And so, both of you and I are both foodies, as we know. But oftentimes people don't really lean into the diversity of culinary experiences that they could have in other countries or through other countries, right? And so, being a Dominican yourself, right? If I was South Georgia, grew up on grits and gravy and biscuits, had never really traveled to the Caribbean, and now I'm about to venture out and experience Dominican culture for the first time, what's a good starter dish for the everyday Black person to experience Dominican culture, where they would taste it for the first time and just fall in love at that moment?
Wow. Well, I'll give you two because it just popped in my head. One, if you like something a little sweet, especially if you're Southern, there's something called habichuela con dulce. Dulce meaning sugar or sweet. Habichuela meaning what many people know as beans, but they're red beans and they're made as a dessert. And it is fantastic. It is fantastic. So I'm just saying it's fantastic, and I'll say it again, it's fantastic. If you like things that are sweet. But other than that, I kind of always go into, because I like plátano. And I just, I think it's important. It should be like a separate food group, plátanos. I'm just saying. I will always tell somebody to get mangú. Mangú con los tres golpes, which means mangú is the word, and tres golpes means 3 hits. Mangú is boiled, normally green plantains. Sometimes people make it with yellow because they like it a little sweeter. And then the 3 golpes are eggs, fried cheese, Dominican cheese specifically, which has a different taste to it, and salchichon, which is a type of sausage that's made in DR. You can get it here, but it tastes better there, you know. But those would be the two things for me. And of course, for the people that like to drink, there's something in the that you can have mori soñando, which is called died sleeping in English. It don't sound too good. And I'm not going to tell you the ingredients, because the ingredients, if I tell it to you, it sounds a little, but it tastes fabulous. And you can have that any time of the day. Anytime.
I mean, you had me a died sleeping. I can see somebody watching the show and be like, that sounds like, you know, I might have to take that risk. I might have to give that a shot.
Anybody.
Yeah, that's it. You know, that's what some people call Hennessy and Coke too, but that's beside the point. So the other question for the culture, of course, Venus, is that, you know, you grew up in the theater. You're a theater kid, right? Shout out to the Coconut Grove Children's Theater, right? And so, you know, we know that there's such a thing as the EGOT, right? Someone who gets an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony, right? And so, yes. Curious to know, you know, if you could remake a play, a song, a movie, and a television show to build your own EGOT, which would those shows be? And keeping with the culture, like if you could be a character on a show, you know, that you grew up watching or that you were inspired by, how would you get your EGOT?
Oh, wow. You know, you put me on the spot for this one. Well, one of my favorite plays is Porky and Bess. So I would say that for a theater. For a TV show, it's going to sound a little funny because I don't know if, I mean, you could get for voiceover. I would love to be like a character in Fat Albert. Like, I don't know. I'm just being honest.
Listen, shout out to Fat Albert again. I heard you. Okay.
I'm just being honest.
Listen, I appreciate it.
A song to remake, it's just that I don't know if I would remake any song because they're so fabulous. And there's so much songs in my head, and you know, that's a little crazy. I would have to. I'm gonna have to, like, I'm really thinking about it.
You can come back to the song. Give me the movie, and then we'll go back to the song.
Okay. The movie is. I love the original Sparkle. I don't like the remake or the glitter with Mariah Carey. But I think me as Sparkle, I think it would be fabulous. I know everybody wants to see it, and don't worry, if I ever get an opportunity, I would do it. But I think I would be a great Sparkle. See, I even say it nicely. Sparkle. See, I would do those. And the song, I have no idea, because there's, like, to be quite honest, there's so many artists there, and like the songs that come to my head are already like wonderful, and I just don't think I would. I don't know if I would do it justice, but maybe if I wrote my own song, I'm just saying, I could be a songwriter, and I can maybe get my, you know, my Grammy as a songwriter or a producer, because still technically it falls in the category.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you. And thank you for building that EGOT. And thank you for being on the show, Venus. We appreciate all guests to the show, especially people that I've known as long as I've known you. And thank you for all the work that you're doing, not only in staying, you know, in tune with the culture, but trying to build people and build an inclusive culture along those lines. And so we hope that your work is not done in vain and that it's successful. So look forward to seeing you around the way, and of course, seeing you immersed in the culture. And thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. I was so excited. This was the best. I love it.